Have you ever noticed how the smallest things can creep into your life and quietly become a storm? That's how this all began. At first, there was no big dramatic scene, no confrontation in the street, no angry shouting. It was just a rising number on my electric bill. One month, it went up by $20. Not unusual. The next, another 30. I grumbled about inflation, about how everything these days costs more, and I brushed it off. But deep down, something felt off. My habits hadn't changed. I wasn't suddenly running a bakery out of my kitchen, or leaving lights on all night. Still, I convinced myself it was nothing. That is, until one early Saturday morning when I walked outside, coffee in hand, and froze. There it was. An orange extension cord, thick and glaringly obvious, running straight from my outdoor outlet across my yard, and slithering into Karen's driveway. The end of it plugged neatly into her shiny white Tesla, humming silently as it drank up my electricity. For a long moment, I just stood there, blinking like I was in some kind of prank show. Who does that? Who plugs into someone else's house without asking? At first, I almost laughed. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought. Maybe she thought the outlet was public, like one of those chargers you see at the library or grocery store. I pulled the cord out, coiled it up, and set it by her driveway. Problem solved? Or so I thought. That evening, as I walked back from taking out the trash, I saw it again. The same orange cord, dragged across my lawn like a neon snake, drinking up my power. I marched over to her door and knocked. Karen answered with the kind of smile that looked sweet at first but felt hollow, like she was already mocking you in her head. She leaned against the doorframe, perfectly calm. "Hey," she chirped, as though I were the one intruding. "Karen," I said, pointing at the cord. "Did you plug your car into my house?" Her eyes flicked over, then back to me, like it was the silliest question in the world. "Yeah, just for a little while. You don't mind, right? It's just electricity?" That phrase, "just electricity," would become her favorite excuse. I tried to stay polite. I explained that yes, I did mind, that power costs money, and that it wasn't okay to just help yourself to someone else's outlet. She tilted her head, gave me a patronizing smile, and said, Okay, I get it, sorry about that." She closed the door before I could say another word, and for a moment, I believed her. The next morning, I went outside again, and sure enough, the cord was gone. I felt a little relief. Maybe it had been a misunderstanding after all. Maybe she had realized how absurd it was and wouldn't try it again. But Karen wasn't the type to stop when she wanted something. A few days later, I came home late from work. The sun had set, and as I pulled into my driveway, my headlights swept across the yard. My stomach dropped. There it was again, plugged right back into my outlet, like nothing had ever happened. That night, I didn't knock. I didn't say anything. I just unplugged the cord and left it lying on the ground. The next morning, it was back. And the morning after that, it was as though she had declared silent war. Each time I unplugged it, Karen plugged it back in. Each time I told myself to stay calm, she tested the boundary again. My bills climbed higher, and the irritation in my chest grew like a pressure cooker. But more than the money, it was the principle. She was stepping into my space, using what was mine, and pretending it was nothing. Pretending I was the unreasonable one for caring. Neighbors started to notice too. I caught glances from across the street. One man chuckled as he saw me pulling the cord away again. The humiliation stung almost more than the theft. Karen wasn't just stealing power. She was stealing my peace, my dignity, and turning me into the neighborhood fool without even saying a word. That's when the seed of anger planted itself. I didn't know it yet. But this wasn't going to be a one-time problem. This was the beginning of a battle. And Karen had just lit the first spark. Once Karen realized, I wasn't going to just let her quietly siphon off my electricity. She turned the whole thing into a battle of wills. At first, I tried to handle it like a reasonable adult. One evening, after I came home to find the cord snaking across my yard yet again, I marched over to Karen's door. This time, I wasn't smiling. "Karen," I said firmly, holding up the cord like evidence in a trial. "We've already talked about this. You cannot use my electricity. Period. End of story." She gave me that same condescending smile. "You're being dramatic," she said, waving her hand as if I was a child throwing a tantrum. "It's just a little charge. Your lights probably use more in a day than my car does in a night." The way she said it, like I was some measure counting pennies, made my jaw clench. But I kept my voice steady. "It doesn't matter how much it costs. It's mine. You didn't ask. It's stealing." She rolled her eyes, muttered something about how some people just don't know how to share, and closed the door in my face. That was the moment I realized this wasn't ignorance. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Karen knew exactly what she was doing, and she didn't care. The weeks that followed were exhausting. Every time I unplugged her cord, it reappeared. Sometimes during the day, sometimes late at night. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and glance outside, only to see her car glowing faintly under the streetlight, connected once again to my outlet. My electric bill ballooned. Not a small jump anymore, but a significant hit. Money that could have gone toward groceries, gas, or savings. Every time I opened the bill, my stomach tightened. But worse than the money was the sheer audacity. The more Karen ignored me, the more invisible I felt. It was like shouting into the wind, like I didn't even exist on my own property. I tried blocking her access. I bought outlet covers, ones with little locks on them. For a few days, it seemed to work. But Karen was persistent, like a raccoon raiding a trash can. She found another outlet on the side of my house. When I locked that, she ran the cord through a gap in my garage door I hadn't even realized was there. It became a twisted game. Every move I made to defend my home, she countered with a new tactic, and she always did it with that same smug attitude, as if she was proving a point. The humiliation grew heavier when the neighbors started talking. One morning, while I was coiling up the cord yet again, my next door neighbor chuckled. "She's at it again, huh?" he said, sipping his coffee from his porch. I forced a smile, but inside I was burning. Karen wasn't just draining my power. She was draining my pride. People were watching me get walked over, and Karen knew it. Then came the final straw. I opened my electric bill one Friday afternoon, and my breath caught in my throat. It was nearly double the usual amount. Hundreds of dollars higher. I sank into a chair, staring at the numbers like they couldn't possibly be real. My mind ran through all the things I had sacrificed that month. All the ways I had budgeted carefully, only to see my hard-earned money vanish into Karen's luxury car battery. That night, as I sat on my porch, watching the faint glow of her Tesla plugged in once again, something inside me snapped. I realized I couldn't keep playing defense. Karen had no intention of stopping, no sense of guilt or shame. If anything, she enjoyed watching me struggle. And in that moment, my anger sharpened into clarity. This wasn't just about electricity anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and the simple right to say no without being dismissed. Karen had declared this a power struggle, and if that's what she wanted, then fine. It was time to fight back. By the time the next electric bill arrived, I knew I couldn't go on like this. Arguing with Karen was pointless. Blocking her cords was pointless. She had made up her mind that my home was her personal charging station, and nothing short of force would stop her. But I wasn't about to do anything violent, and I didn't want to stoop to her level. I needed something smarter. That's when the idea came. I called up a buddy of mine, an old college friend named Mike, who worked in electrical systems. I explained the situation, half embarrassed as I told him that my neighbor had turned me into her unpaid power plant. At first, he laughed, but when he heard how much money I was losing, he stopped. "All right," he said. "You don't want to hurt anyone. You just want to make it. So if she plugs in again, she regrets it. I think I've got just the thing." We spent the weekend working on it. Mike showed up with his toolkit and a special breaker circuit we could wire onto the outdoor outlet Karen loved to use. The beauty of it was that it wasn't dangerous. No risk of shocking anyone or starting fires. But it would overload and trip as soon as someone tried to draw too much power, and if that someone happened to be a Tesla pulling more juice than the outlet could give, well, let's just say the car wouldn't be happy. As we worked, I felt something I hadn't in weeks control. For so long, I had been reacting to Karen's moves, feeling powerless in my own home. Now, for the first time, I was taking action. Each twist of a screwdriver, each click of a wire in place, felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. By Sunday evening, the trap was set. Mike gave me a reassuring nod. Don't worry. It won't hurt her. It won't burn your house down. But it'll send a clear message. I didn't tell anyone. Not my neighbors. Not even my family. I just waited. The first night passed without incident. I wondered if maybe Karen had finally gotten the message, but the second night, just as I was settling into bed, I saw that familiar orange cord, trailing across my lawn, plugged firmly into my outlet. I sat by the window, heart pounding, waiting. At first, nothing. The Tesla's little green light blinked calmly, as if mocking me. I began to doubt myself. Maybe the circuit wasn't going to trip, maybe Karen would win yet again. Then it happened. A sharp pop echoed from the outlet, followed by a loud click. The glow on the Tesla's charger suddenly went dark. A second later, the car's dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree with flashing error codes. And then, Karen's scream. I nearly jumped out of my chair. I peered through the curtains and saw her storming out of the house in her robe, yelling at the car like it had betrayed her. She yanked the cord from the outlet, stomped around the driveway, and then glared across the yard at my house, as if she knew I had something to do with it. I ducked back from the window, fighting the urge to laugh out loud. My heart was racing, not from fear but from relief. Finally, after weeks of being ignored and dismissed, I had the upper hand. The next morning, the knock came, hard and fast. I opened the door to find Karen red-faced, holding the orange cord like a weapon. "You broke my car," she screeched. "Do you know how expensive this is?" "You're going to pay for this?" I stayed calm. "Karen, I didn't touch your car. I protected my home. If your car got damaged from plugging into something you weren't supposed to use, that's not my fault." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was furious, but for once she had no comeback. She stomped off, muttering threats under her breath, and slammed her door. And just like that, the cord never came back. That night, I sat on my porch in the quiet, staring at the outlet that had once been the center of so much stress. The air felt lighter, the house felt safer, and for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. I didn't feel guilty. Not for 1 second. What I felt was something deeper: vindication. Karen had ignored my words, ignored my boundaries, ignored my rights. But she couldn't ignore the consequences, and in that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes you don't win battles by shouting louder or fighting harder. Sometimes you win by being smarter. Karen had declared war, and I had ended it with a circuit breaker. After the circuit trick worked, my yard felt different, quieter. For weeks, I had been living in a cycle of stress. Checking the outlets, listening for the hum of a charging car at night, bracing myself for another bill that made my stomach knot. But suddenly, it was gone. The orange cord didn't appear. My electricity bill returned to normal, and most importantly, Karen stopped acting like my property was hers. Of course, peace didn't come instantly. For several days after, Karen gave me the silent treatment. No fake smiles, no sarcastic "thanks," not even a muttered "hey" when we crossed paths. Instead, I'd catch her glaring at me through half-closed blinds or pacing her driveway like she was plotting her next move. At first, I braced for retaliation. Was she going to report me to the OA? File some bogus complaint? Try to get other neighbors on her side? But as the days passed, I realized something: Karen wasn't used to being told no. She thrived on control, on bending others until they gave up. But this time, she had lost. Not because I yelled louder or fought nastier, but because I stood firm in a way she couldn't override. Then came the neighborhood chatter. It turned out I wasn't the only one Karen had rubbed the wrong way. A neighbor down the street confided that she had borrowed tools and never returned them. Another said she let her dog run through their garden and acted like it wasn't her problem. Everyone had their own Karen story. When word spread about the Tesla incident, reactions were mixed. Some laughed, calling me clever. Others thought I was petty for setting up a breaker instead of just ignoring her. But here's the thing, they weren't the ones losing money every month. They weren't the ones being treated like their home didn't matter. One evening, while I was grilling in the backyard, my next-door neighbor, Tom, leaned over the fence with a grin. "Heard about the little spark," he said, chuckling. "Good for you." Someone had to put her in her place. That small moment of support meant more than I realized. For weeks I had felt like the joke of the neighborhood, the guy who couldn't stop his pushy neighbor from stealing power. But now, I wasn't the victim anymore. I had taken control, and people noticed. Karen, on the other hand, adjusted her strategy. A month later, she had a solar panel setup installed on her garage roof. I caught her bragging to another neighbor about how eco-friendly she was, as though the decision was purely about saving the planet. I just smiled quietly, knowing the real reason she'd gone green. She never apologized. Not once. That's not who she was. In Karen's world, she was never wrong. But actions speak louder than words, and the fact that her cord never touched my outlet again was apology enough for me. And in a way, I didn't even need an apology. Because what I got out of that whole mess was something more valuable than her words, a reminder of the importance of boundaries. Here's the truth, standing up for yourself doesn't always look like a big dramatic fight. Sometimes it's small. Sometimes it's quiet. And sometimes, it's simply refusing to be walked on, even when others tell you you're being dramatic or petty. Karen had tried to make me doubt myself, to belittle my feelings by saying, "It's just electricity." But it wasn't just electricity. It was my money, my property, my right to say no. And once I stopped letting her redefine the situation, I found my strength. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: people will test your boundaries. Some will push and push, hoping you'll cave. But when you stand firm, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with clarity, they eventually have no choice but to back down. I look at that outlet now, the same one that once caused me so much stress, and it makes me smile. Not because I won against Karen, but because I proved to myself that I could stand up when it mattered. And maybe that's the real lesson here. In life, we all face our own Karens. People who take advantage, who dismiss us, who think they're entitled to what isn't theirs. You can't always change them, but you can change how you respond. For me, it took a little wiring trick to make the point. For you, it might be something else. But the principle is the same: respect yourself enough to protect your boundaries, because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't yelling, or fighting, or giving in. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is cut the cord.